Okay. We should be live. Awesome. And anybody checking the LinkedIn, please see if you're able to see the live. Yes, I'm able to see it on my end. We are live.
Yes, it's fine.
Awesome. So what I would recommend is for you to add comments on the LinkedIn chat on interesting observations from here. Oh my God, we already have people waiting in there in the chat on LinkedIn.
I'll
Awesome.
take care of that.
Thank you. Thank you. Yash, I appreciate that. Okay. I'm just writing that we are live with Sahaj Vaidya. Okay. Okay. So, hello everyone. I'm Sudha Jamthe, and this is Weekly WED, our speaker series at Business School of AI. And we have been talking a lot on different topics related to generative AI and LLM. And in the past, we've covered a lot on AI ethics and inclusive AI. And recently, we had Pamela Gupta come in and talk to us about trust as a service. And so you think, okay, we've learned a lot about responsive AI from Yash. We've learned a lot about AI ethics. So what's new? And we have an exciting speaker and an exciting topic today. So before I move forward and introduce the speaker, I have to, take care of some logistics. So some of you are here on Zoom, so you know the drill. If you don't want to be on the camera, because this is being streamed to YouTube and LinkedIn. So just by, speaking up or, being on camera, you're giving us permission to kind of, be on the screen. And this will go to places because we will put this out in the newsletter and share this. Okay. So if you don't want, you can go off camera. If you don't want to speak, you are welcome to speak and ask questions. If you don't want to, then you can chat here, right? The other thing is I would encourage you to give your name and where you're joining from, because we have a very international mix of people here. And I would encourage you to sign up and connect with each other. It's as important as just listening to the speakers too. Okay. And on Weekly WED on Business School of AI, from where you all started, you may not even remember that, but you signed up on Teachable on Business School of AI, and from there we started sending you the Zoom link, so you just show up from the Zoom link. But in there, we've created a community area so you can talk to each other. And so today's deck, after the presentation is done, I will make sure that we put it up there. And I want to introduce Deepika Sarkar, who's joining me in my team as our new AI ethics strategist. So anything that I am working on that is a deliverable, if you have an ask of me, Deepika will make sure that I'm on top of it. So hello, Deepika. Thank you for joining us. You'll be seeing more of Deepika soon. So Deepika has also graciously volunteered to show the deck for the speaker today as she goes through our presentation. Okay. And what else do we need in terms of logistics? And so for those of you who are on LinkedIn out there, LinkedIn is what I'm going to be checking. So add a question, comment, and even after the presentation, if you come and watch this recording on LinkedIn, you can add a question and we try to come back and find answers and get you the answers. And anything that we are sharing here, all those links, we will put it out there in LinkedIn. I see some of you on LinkedIn, so feel free to chat it. And my job here, as soon as I introduce the speaker and get started, is to field your questions. So if you have questions, I'm going to come check on LinkedIn. And this time I'm going to, be on top of the game, just watching the LinkedIn. Okay. Let me introduce our speaker today. So we have Sahaj Vaidya. Sahaj, let me see if I can pin Sahaj. Add a pin. Hi, Sahaj. How are you doing?
Hi, I'm doing great. Thank you so much for having me on the Weekly Wednesday series here. Thank you.
Wonderful. And thank you to Pariya for organizing this. She's not here, but this runs well only because of Pariya. So thank you, Pariya Swaran. So we have Sahaj Vaidya, and I'm going to put her LinkedIn here, and I'm going to tag her on the LinkedIn also, so you know where to go find her after this. And Sahaj Vaidya is a doctoral student in data science at NJIT, which is New Jersey Institute of Technology. And one of the thing that's interesting and why we sought her and brought her today is because she is doing some amazing PhD doctoral research in ethical AI governance. We've heard about governance, we've heard about policy, we've heard about AI ethics in separate forms. But what she is doing is her doctoral research is focused on ethical AI governance and data-driven decision making. So I love the combination of it, and it is also Department of Informatics. So that was very interesting for me. And I'm going to talk to her more so we can hear a lot about her work and projects. So one of the things I heard about Sahaj's research is the Open Explainability Protocol. So we're going to hear about that in a little bit. And other than that, Sahaj Vaidya serves as a AI ethics officer at Zen. So we'll hear a little bit about her background. And then the other thing is, she was at the CAIDP fellow, the spring cohort. She's a NIST fellow, and she's actually set standards from NIST. And she was also a privacy analyst at the World Ethical Data Forum. And so, lot of different contribution, which is amazing, and a very data-driven approach to AI ethics governance is what is fascinating for me. So what I'm going to do is, without further ado, I'm just going to, just bring Sahaj online. Hi, Sahaj. Tell us a little bit. I mean, I
Hi,
scattered, worked here, there, and contributed various things.
no
So
problem.
are you? Tell us, what do you do?
So, first of all, I really appreciate this opportunity to be able to speak to this diverse and amazing audience here on this series. Thank you, Pariya, Deepika, and Sudha, you for having me here and inviting me. So, giving a brief introduction of the work that I'm doing. I'm a final year PhD student in Department of Informatics at New Jersey Institute of Technology, and my current doctoral research focuses on looking at ethical implications of AI governance and data-driven policy making. The aim of my work is to develop a set of safety guidelines and protocols for deployment of these AI systems. The aim is to kind of bridge the gap between how the software developers, like those who develop these AI models, can imbibe the ethical principles of transparency and explainability right into the privacy by design stage of model development rather than the later stages of deployment evaluation, so that we can at least mitigate or minimize the unfair or unpredictable outcomes when the model arrives at a certain decision.
Okay, so there are a lot of different, I think we are going to unravel that with your deck today on the actual
Sure.
topic. So, what about the various different roles? What is Zen? You were doing something at Zen. Tell us
So
about that.
Zen is a small-scale US-based company which is involved in building custom ChatGPT solutions and outsourcing and licensing them to other companies or organizations who are in need of it. So I provide them consultancy on adoption of responsible AI into their enterprise planning.
Okay, okay. So we'll get to that a little bit more because we are interested in specifically when you get to talk about AI security and doing this in a very responsible way. And with LLM, it's like a whole different animal. So we'll get to that in sequence the way you're thinking. What about the various organizations? What about the NIST fellow? What is your role in that?
So with NIST, I'm involved in developing uh, the guidelines with the NIST AI RMF framework. Now we know that AI is a very critical and emerging technology. So even though NIST has an initial version of the risk management framework, but things keep on constantly changing and evolving. So we are constantly working on iterating through the different versions of the draft of the RMF playbook and working on setting up guidelines for the same.
Okay. And is there any other organization you've been involved in? Because I did see something like
With the World Ethical Data
uh,
Forum, I'm
yeah.
helping them develop an AI taxonomy related to regulations in the space, like the EUA Act, the Executive Order in the White House, the
Yep.
standards set by the ISO and various organizations.
And you will be talking about that, so I don't need to dig into that right now.
Sure.
Okay. And there was something
We
else.
can start with the
Yep.
slides.
Perfect. Okay, perfect. Deepika, you can share the slide. I'm just going to go off camera and I'm going to listen in. Thank you, Sahaj. Take it away. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you. So, as I mentioned, that AI is a very critical and emerging technology. Like you sleep for 6 hours in a day, you wake up the next day and you find 10 new developments in the field. And we have been kind of aware, it's very difficult for us to stay abreast of all the development that are currently happening around us. But as the saying goes, that every technology has its equal positive and negative side. So that's why the same goes with AI. We need to be aware about putting safety guardrails surrounding the usage of the system. So today during my presentation, I'll be focusing on how to implement some security measures and what are the current scopes within this domain of AI security and the usage of generative AI and LLMs. So please go to the next slide. So now what is responsible AI? We have been hearing a lot of stuff and hype surrounding responsible AI. But what is it actually, right? We must be wondering, like, why responsible AI? Why not just AI? Now, when any new technology is introduced, not just AI, things are bound to go in a haphazard manner and undesired outputs are meant to be obtained because it's a new and evolving landscape. So even those who are regularly involved with development of these things might not be fully aware about the capacities, gaps, or limitations existing in the space. So whenever some undesired or unexpected outputs occur, there may be certain groups or sections that may remain underserved or underrepresented. And that's why we need to ensure that whenever these AI systems are put into commercial setting or for deployment in real world settings, we need to ensure that the principles of privacy, governance, accountability, auditability, robustness, security, human oversight, fairness, and non-discrimination are imbibed thoroughly. These principles, when combined together, form the responsible AI framework. Next slide. Now, as I mentioned that combination of several principles like robustness, security, transparency, fairness, non-discrimination come together to give us the definition related to responsible AI. So going a step towards that direction of achieving responsible AI, the first thing is security as a principle of responsible AI. Now, why security? Now we know that whenever we use these AI systems for any real world setting, bias often creeps into these systems knowingly or unknowingly. And even though we may try to make these systems very robust, resilient, and secure against these attacks, but as AI keeps on evolving, the attacks, the type of attacks, and the nature of attacks that take place with the usage of the AI systems also takes place a different shape and different forms. So we need to make sure that the systems that we build are secure against these kind of attacks, because we know that the attackers will also kind of evolve their techniques and tools based on the evolving landscape of AI. So it might not be that easy to safeguard our systems against the new attacks being introduced daily. Next slide, please. Now, as I mentioned earlier, that there are tons of organizations and governments working in this space to provide us with how we can use responsible AI into actual practice. We have been talking a lot about putting responsible AI, utilizing it in an ethical, careful manner, but large scale tech companies like Microsoft, Google, Facebook have introduced their own frameworks for the same. So yeah, please go to the next slide. Now, as I mentioned earlier during the intro session, that I'm working with a nonprofit in the United Kingdom called World Ethical Data Forum, where we are trying to kind of build a taxonomy for AI regulation. Now, you know that with countries picking up pace with their AI regulations and guidelines, starting from small scale startups to large scale tech companies, everyone has to abide by these regulatory compliances or they may face legal consequences. And a lot of these policies and guidelines exist in the space out there. But often the problem is that the clients and the business organizations do not know what's in store for them and how they should kind of go ahead with their enterprise planning. Hence, with this project, our aim is to kind of equip them with the right tool of information to navigate through this regulatory landscape. Next slide, please. So, as I mentioned earlier, that companies like Microsoft, Google have their own frameworks, but ultimately, all of these frameworks narrow down to one single thing: responsible, safe, robust, and resilient usage of AI systems. So even though these frameworks may look very different on the first instance, when you drill down, when you actually take a detailed look at the documentation available out there, it all ultimately points in the one single direction. So there's also this one thing, like why do we need these kind of frameworks? Like we have seen a couple of examples earlier during the presentation, and I also talked about them. But why do every company or every organization out there needs to put them? The answer to that question is very simple. Let us take a very common scenario from our day-to-day lifestyle. Now, all of us have been using iPhones for a couple of years now, right? Now, you must be setting up alarm with your Siri on the iPhone. Say, for example, if the next day is a holiday, Siri will immediately remind you that, hey, tomorrow's a holiday. Daily, you are waking up at 6 a.m. But since tomorrow's a holiday, do you want to set the alarm to a later time? So, how did it gain this kind of information? You must be first on a first instance. You must be very impressed about that. Hey, Siri is taking a lot care of me, looking up at my schedule, trying to set up alarm for me, and stuff like that. But did you actually go a level deeper and think about it? Where did Siri obtain this data from, right? That's a question we really need to understand. That this data ultimately comes from our behavior with and the usage of our phone. And that's why we need responsible AI practices. Any questions so far?
No, I think it's fine. We can keep moving. People are just warming up and they'll come up with questions.
Okay. Could you please go to the next slide? So as I gave the example of Siri, that's a very common and day-to-day example that all of us have experienced in our lives. When you're dealing with, say, highly regulated and confidential setting like healthcare, and when you tell someone that an AI robot will perform a surgery for you, or maybe an AI-based tool will perform a diagnostic screening for you, they'll be a kind of little hesitant, a little wary about revealing their personal information to this non-human entity. And the non-human factor plays a very important role here. We need to enhance and foster users' trust that their data is safe and secure with us and not vulnerable to any data breaches. Just like Google and Microsoft, NIST has also published a taxonomy of ML attacks. And as I briefly mentioned previously, it also works on providing detailed outlines about how to develop and build AI systems that can be secure and resilient and thwart against these attacks. Next slide, please. This is another framework given by ENISA about securing machine learning algorithms. It provides a high-level taxonomy about identification of the cybersecurity threats, identifying potential vulnerabilities, and how to overcome these vulnerabilities. All these frameworks that we saw up till now are openly accessible and available on the internet out there, so you can easily refer to them. But mind will, these are very theoretical and long reports, so you might get easily bored reading through them, and hence I've kind of presented brief snapshots summarizing the high-level key points from these documents. Next slide. Now, Microsoft, along with proposing a framework for responsible AI, has also given a taxonomy similar to ENISA about the failure modes in the AI and ML security, like how to perform threat modeling. All those are technical details, but just to give you a brief idea, this framework provides details about what kind of threats and attacks, all the vulnerabilities exist in the space out there, and how to build robust AI systems. Next slide, please. This is the Google Secure AI framework, similar to that of Microsoft. Next slide.
Sahaj, can you go back?
Yeah, sure.
Can you go back? So can you give us a little bit more detail on, when you say that, because I know every company has come up with their own, and we have seen a lot of this in terms of fairness and explainability, that they all had their own standard, or they said we are going to build to that. But this goes to the beginning. Give us a little bit more detail on, the ML taxonomy and how would you build this? This is at the start, or is this in the development cycle? What is like?
So this,
Yeah.
yes, a very good question, and something that you have raised. That this is actually the taxonomy that Microsoft has proposed is for utilizing it throughout the software development life cycle, not just at the post-deployment phase.
Yeah.
We need to integrate this right from the development to the user testing phase. Only then we'll be able to build robust systems that can thwart against these attacks. Addressing the failure modes only at the end or after deployment might lead to undesired outcomes which might bear more negative consequences.
So what about the NIST one? In the previous slide, you said NIST, it's more a general standard, right? So if
yes, NIST is a kind of, yeah.
Go ahead.
is more of prescriptive in nature.
So if somebody is getting started building a startup and they're building this ground up, right? Building whatever technology to build the AI and the ML ground up, what would be the starting point? Is the Microsoft one for Microsoft Technologies, Google one for Google Technologies? Is NIST a generic one? What would be the starting point? Are they
It
similar?
really
Is there
depends
overlap?
on the need, and see, different sectors across various industries have different requirements. You
Okay.
cannot develop a set of 10 guidelines and say this is it. No,
Yeah.
there is no one size fits all solution in this case. So you really need to perform gap analysis and assessment in order to identify your needs and priorities.
Okay. Okay. So move forward. So we'll pick up as we proceed to the LLM. I have another question, but I'll wait.
Yeah, please go. Yeah. Next slide. Now we come to generative AI. Up till now, we saw the classical AI and machine learning models. Even with them, things are complicated, but when the component of generative AI is introduced, things become a whole lot different and complex. Because the architecture of LLM is pretty complicated. They are very black box in nature, and it's very difficult to unbox these systems and understand how they work, right? So, from the defensive as well as offensive side of security, things take a highly different turn. Next slide, please. Now, OWASP is a top tier organization working in this domain of providing security in terms of generative AI and LLMs. As you can see in the diagram, they have outlined certain standards about where and how the attacks can occur in the LLM architecture. Please take 2 minutes to go through this.
Can you walk us through a little bit? It's not very readable.
Yeah, sure.
And in the previous slide, you gave us a generic flow of various different things that can be a security risk using prompt engineering or various different things you had in the previous slide.
Yeah.
So is that the same thing that OWASP is actually creating a framework to do this?
Yeah. That's exactly how it goes. So here, OWASP is working on providing like how at the first stage of prompt injection or maybe the output handling or model theft, at which stages their vulnerabilities exist and how the attacks occur at these different stages. Next slide, please. So now that we know that there are security risks occurring in LLM, so what should we do to manage and handle those risks, right? We already know that they are occurring. So in order to mitigate these security risks, there are certain policies and guidelines. Several of these guidelines are mentioned on this slide, as you can see on the screen. They are developing comprehensive AI policies, data protection and sanitization, security testing and monitoring, AI safety plugin tools, confidential computing, observability and performance management, and one of the latest techniques that's available out there about retrieval augmented generation, and reinforcement learning, human in the loop feedback. Next slide, please. We won't go into details of these 7 aspects because that will become a very technical session about LLMs. Now we cover a different aspect. That is about responsible usage of open source tools and techniques in terms of AI. Now we are aware that a lot of open source tools and kits are available out there. And when the component of AI is introduced into these open source tools and techniques, problems take a different turn. Next slide, please. So, what are the challenges and concerns associated with the intersection of AI and open source? Because the softwares and the tools which are open source are very openly available and accessible by anyone and everyone, putting safety guardrails or limiting the usage of these systems becomes very difficult, and that's where the challenge lies. Next slide, please. So, how do we implement responsible AI practices or principles when it comes to the usage of open source technologies? We utilize certain aspects like privacy, security, robustness, accountability, and human oversight, as mentioned in the slides in the beginning. Next slide, please. Now, as I mentioned that the EU has just a couple of days back, EU voted in favor of the AI Act. So now what does the EU AI Act state in terms of the intersection of the usage of artificial intelligence and the usage of open source terminologies? So now there are a couple of snippets that we have taken from the EU AI Act, which state about the intersection of these two critical things. It states that developers, as highlighted in yellow, that developers of free and open source AI components should be encouraged to implement widely adopted documentation practices. Whatever you do with the usage of AI and open source should be well documented, and it should be in compliance with the existing documentation techniques. Next slide, please. And along with these guidelines and policies, there are already a lot of open source responsible AI toolkits occurring in the space out there. And these toolkits are proposed by the large scale tech companies, well known tech companies, who have also given out their responsible AI frameworks, like the IBM AI Fairness 360, FairLearn, Microsoft Responsible AI Toolbox, Model Cards from Microsoft, and a lot of these toolkits are available out there. Next slide.
Sahaj, we have actually covered IBM Fairness 360 extensively, and many of the people here on Zoom are my students from various places, and we have Yashashwini who's here who actually teaches fairness and explainability. So we are familiar with that. So how does that tie back? I mean, you showed the EU AI Act where they said, okay, developers are encouraged to do this. We are not going to hold them accountable. I've seen some debate on choosing LLM models, saying open source is more risky than closed model, which I do not believe for the record. But can you talk to us a little bit? Yes, the language in the EU AI Act is to encourage developers. Developers could be anybody, right? And then you're
Yes.
saying here are the frameworks. How do you actually ensure that AI built is secure, to your point of responsible AI, with AI security as one of the principles?
Oh, thank you for raising this point. So actually, the EU AI Act does state that developers, like anyone who's involved in development of these AI models, should integrate responsible AI practices and documentation techniques when utilizing these open source technologies, especially the toolkits like IBM 360 or the Microsoft Model Cars or PairLearn and those kind of toolkits. But then there remains a gap between what's actually stated in the AI Act and how these toolkits are put into actual usage or
Yep.
when they are actually put into purpose. And that's where the limitation exists. Like, even though the EU AI Act has a very comprehensive coverage, it does not go into the granular details about how the companies or the organizations should get themselves certified regarding the usage of these things. And that's why the limitations exist. And currently, at hand, we do not have any answers to those questions.
So I remember earlier, I think sometime during last year, there was a whole movement towards AI auditing. And there were a lot of different
Yes.
frameworks and benchmarks and tools that came about. I'm not seeing them in practice. I'm hearing you about the standards that developers should follow. I'm hearing about how, like you're supporting Zen, there are people who are knowledgeable about this, who are helping the enterprise do some gap analysis and get ready. But then there seems like a disconnect. Are there like auditing tools? Would you recommend something more practical for people to make sure what they
So
build is
currently,
secure?
given that AI is a critical and emerging like technology, uh, it's kind of the companies right now. They could be large scale tech companies or they could be very small scale initial startups. They are not very proactive in terms of utilizing these responsible AI practices. They do it just as a requirement in order to fulfill the compliance and the regulatory aspects. But they do not do it in a proactive manner so as to get the maximum benefits out of it. And that's why it's kind of difficult to gather information about how they should go ahead with their planning or how they should adopt these practices into actual deployment or commercial scale purposes.
So it looks like we have left it to the companies to act ethically. And that's why there's the disconnect, right? If it does not make business sense, then they get away with it in some places. But at least even with the AI EU Act, doesn't look like we have compliance that is going to force them to make their AI more trustworthy or
Yes, yes, yes. Right. The next slide, please. So now what are the challenges? Right? Next slide. So these are kind of the responsible AI principles that we covered in the beginning, like governance and accountability. There is a need. Like, as we took the example of the healthcare setting, say, for example, if a model made a certain misdiagnosis, whom would you hold accountable? Whether it's the software developer, the company developing the model, the doctor, the patient, we don't know. The current existing guidelines and frameworks do not provide an education about the same. Next slide. Now, there comes a very important topic about bias and fairness. So, as you mentioned, you had a couple of interesting and productive sessions about the same. So, you must be aware that bias occurs in some form or the other of the model pipeline, whether you want it or not, knowingly or unknowingly. And that's where the responsible AI toolkits that we talked about come into picture. Next slide. Data dependencies and security. Next slide, please. So now how do we prepare for the upcoming AI regulations? That company, as I mentioned in response to one of your questions, the companies are not proactive in terms of their regulations. So they need to integrate these approaches like anticipating the regulations, implementing privacy and security measures, strengthening their documentation, and utilizing the model cards in order to adopt responsible AI practices into their business planning. Next slide, please. So what are some of the strategies that we can utilize for fostering responsible AI adoption? Some of these techniques include establishing an AI ethics committee into your advisory board, encouraging diverse contributions to see that no group or section remains underserved or underrepresented, implementing transparency and privacy measures, and then utilizing privacy by design and those kind of tools and techniques. When it comes to utilizing open source, we see that they are properly documented, and promoting the usage of responsible AI techniques through conducting various awareness programs and workshops. So I would like to conclude my presentation by saying that AI is, the next slide, please. AI is here to complement and enhance human cognition. It's not here to take over our jobs or replace the tasks that you have been doing, because nothing can come on par with human level cognition and the human touch that's given to the task that we are performing. So please do not fear and run away from AI. Rather, embrace it in an open manner and go ahead with utilizing to get the maximum potential benefits out of it. Thank you for your attention. Feel free to put down any questions that you have.
Deepika, can you stop sharing the slide so we can see the speaker? Yes. Okay, guys, we have had extensive classes about Fairness 360. So this is an introduction level because we had learned about AI security from Pamela from a very different incident management upstream, right? Like if we are building on Sahaj, we are building on ChatGPT. ChatGPT has an incident and that affects our customers. So we had discussion on how do you do that when down how the products are affected, right? That slide, what you said about prompt engineering, we've had a lot of lessons on, detail, general prompt engineering and, all the different prompt injection and all that stuff that comes with it. So it was a lot to take in. I like the section on open source, but I feel like I'm still left with questions, or it looks like the way, at least in spite of all the standards and regulations out there, it is still looks like there's no compliance. It is more, it's not like, GDPR.
Absolutely.
GDPR clearly says what needs to be done when you use customer data, right?
Exactly. There are no elaborate guidelines about the same.
So given all that, especially the NIST one that you shared, right? It's very intriguing for me. So how would one go about? So this whole NIST taxonomy of ML attacks, right? Like detecting the attack or, out of distribution input, and you have like a lot of detail in it. How should one go about utilizing this?
So actually, as someone also previously pointed out, we need to first of all sit down and have a thorough idea about what are the requirements of our organization, whether it's the privacy and security of user data, whether it's customer target, whether it's safeguarding the models, what are your requirements? And based on that, you can utilize the current frameworks that are existing in the space out there.
Okay. Guys, do you have any question? Anybody has any questions from especially Ananya is here. I think, she cares a lot about the healthcare space. And you gave that example that who do you blame when something goes wrong, right? There's no one person.
Yeah, the current guidelines do not state whom to hold accountable for.
Okay. So before we let you go, since you're helping Zen with ChatGPT, like intelligent chatbot implementation, I mean, one of the things I personally like to get from every presentation is, I would like to understand the technology and the frameworks and everything else, but I would like to have something more practical on what do I do with this. So talk to us about what you do for Zen. How do you go about helping them mitigate bias, not bias, right? AI security risk in building intelligent chatbot. So I'm building a chatbot. Say, give me an example of a kind of customer chatbot that they are building and how you're helping them.
So say, for example, if we're developing a chatbot to utilize online payment systems using blockchain tools and technologies, right?
Yeah.
It's one use case. Now, in this case, given that we are dealing with payment systems, we need to ensure that the payment gateway is safe and secure, especially when the component of blockchain is introduced, things take a very drastic turn. So when they are working on these kind of chatbots, I help them make the systems more resilient and secure by utilizing some of these principles from the existing tools and the frameworks so that the systems do not potentially get biased against a certain group of the data that we are dealing with, and see that there is a fairness occurring, or at least we can mitigate the level of bias.
So if the most common example I hear on the intelligent chatbots is simple customer service, right? And I see that all the time when we are traveling, the chatbot pops up and it says, okay, now you can cancel the travel or move it, and things like that, right? So when you're building something like that, what would you said you do gap analysis, right? But when you're building a new chatbot, and for an existing company who's going to maybe do a RAG implementation and integrate into their existing data set of some kind. So what kind of things would you do for them to make sure that it is secure?
So my work is actually focused more towards the governance and policy side of things,
Okay.
rather than the actual development side of things. So my
Okay.
work is to bridge the communication between the software developers, like those who actually develop these AI models,
Yeah.
and the people who are involved in explaining the output of these models.
Okay. So what stage would you get involved? Right. You said this has to happen throughout, right? Right from the beginning.
Yes. So right from the development stage to the later stages of deployment and evaluation.
Okay. So you'll make sure that they understand what is in the NIST guidelines, or if they're using Microsoft in that framework, to make sure that they are in compliance with this, right from
yes,
the stage.
Exactly.
Okay, beautiful. Okay, so I think we are reaching the end of the hour. I want to see if there's anybody has any questions on the LinkedIn chat. I'm not seeing that. I am seeing people there, but they're taking it in.
Yes, Sudha, there is a question.
Yes. Yash, can you bring that question, or can you speak up? Yash?
Yes, I'll read it.
Yeah.
It's by Narendra Sharma. How would you differentiate between medical device and enterprise application when it comes to AI-based application security?
Okay, thank you for the question. Now, when it comes to the healthcare setting, especially utilizing medical devices, things differ a lot based on the geographical location or the type of AI model that they are using. Like if we are dealing with medical devices in United States, then you need to register your software as a medical device using different classes as given by the HIPAA compliance and the FDA. If we are dealing with those medical devices in the European Union, then things differ and you have to register them based on the requirements of the European Union. So these things can take a change based on the geographical location or the type of audience or the type of market that you are targeting.
Okay. Awesome. We are actually reaching the end of the hour, guys. So I need to be the bad cop to wrap up today. We are going to get the slides from our speaker, And we've created a community area in Business School of AI .teachable.com. I'm going to put that right here. So we'll make sure, and we've got Deepika on board. So Deepika is going to be posting the deck on our weekly WED community. So come in, download that, check it out, and then we can continue the conversation, because I think this is a lot to take in. And we also, I see the people who are here, we come at it from various different perspectives. And so based on how you are engaging with a client, or you're building your software or your startup, you might have a different perspective and question. So we can follow up with our speaker here. Thank you so much, Sahaj. We really appreciate this. This was a lot to take
Thank
in.
you so much for your questions and the amazing perspectives that you have given to me.
Thank you so much. We'll follow up, and maybe we can connect with you back on LinkedIn, but we are going to share this
Sure,
deck on Weekly WED, and we might have some discussion and come back to you. So thank you,
for
everybody.
sure.
Yes,
Thank
thank you
you.
so much.
Thank you.
And I hope I have not missed any question. Thank you for bringing that up, Yash, from LinkedIn. But what we'll do is, for those of you who are watching this on LinkedIn, or come back and watch, post your questions, because some of these things take time, because when you hear a topic as a in the beginning, you have your own perspective. I had that when I heard AI security, right? I had my own perspective. So as we go through this, there might be questions. So come and post that, and we'll get our speaker to come back and maybe find.
Okay. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank
Bye.
you. Bye.
Bye. And we'll see you all next week, guys. Yash or Ananya, maybe you can post the link for the community for Weekly WED here, so people can join, and maybe we can continue our conversation there. Because that's one thing that people have been asking me over so many years now, right? That you want to continue to talk with each other, or pick up the topic that we learn here, and we'll continue the discussion there. Okay. Thank you, everybody. And you don't need to sign up or do anything. If you're already in Weekly WED, you will have access. You just come in, read the questions and comments, or you can just contribute or download the deck, do whatever you want. It's fine. Okay. Thank you, everybody. And I will see you next week. Bye.